is going to explore the topic of authentic leadership and is going to be steered by the inimitable Dermot MacDonald. So I'm going to hand it over to her. Dermot will introduce the panel.
So we first started having a little conversation a little while ago, and we kept the title of it fairly broad, in part because we wanted to be able to pick and choose what we'd speak about on the day. But we chose the topic of authentic leadership. And I think it's fair to say, and I'll introduce the panel shortly, that when we first had a conversation about this notion of authentic leadership, it's not that we were being arrogant or thinking that women were invincible, but we did kind of come to the conclusion that you could be forgiven for thinking that now was never a better time, perhaps, in history for women, especially the most feared type, the ambitious woman. In many respects, in terms of there have been so many advances in education, in culture, and in attitude. And then, so we've got a confidence around this conversation. And then this man got elected to the White House. And whilst you can't blame anything on one person, one office, or one election, the presidential campaign in the US, Brexit in the UK, what we're seeing around Europe at the moment, seemed to me that the language around women and the language around immigrants, minorities, became really, really coarse. That suddenly people felt they were able to say, they were given permission to say and do things that previously we didn't. And I find that one of the most alarming campaigns. Obviously there's a political and a socio-economic context. We've had the longest period of austerity, probably since the late 1920s. And I think that history shows us that these things happened. But they were just demagogues all over the world, and suddenly that things that we thought had been put into place, like misogyny and sexism, that have been kept in many respects below a subtle layer, suddenly wasn't so subtle. And for me, just on a personal level, I find that one of the most dispiriting things about the last 18 months, and one of the most worrying things, and I think that we need a constant vigilance around it, but suddenly these prejudices could be expressed, and in some of the most extreme forms that we've seen all over the world. And some of the most extreme forms of prejudice being expressed has been the murders and attacks and other incidents that we've seen. So that's been disappointing for me, because it felt for me that there was an attitude that was being allowed that we could put women in their place once again. And before you all hit the bar and go, Jesus, give me a gin and tonic, this is going to be desperate. I have a panel that's going to give you hope and inspiration, because it's not all that bad, of course, and we're doing very, very well. We've got a brilliant panel together. Adele Clancy, who's the Group Director of Communications and Corporate Affairs at Musgraves. Gillian Keating, who is a first-time, very big Ballybunion welcomer, first-time Women in Media, and she is a partner of Roland Daly German in Cork, and she's also the co-founder of the I Wish Foundation, which encourages women and young girls into STEM, science, technology. I never quite knew what it was, education and maths, because in part those are the subjects I ran away from, like the fleet. And Anya Collins, who needs no introduction, former Fine Gael too, but who's also founded her own company, Blueprint, which is a strategic consultancy firm. So what I wanted to do after my sort of downbeat reflection is maybe to ask each one of you, where are we in the world? What's the state of play for women as you see it? Maybe Adele, I might go with you first to give us a little bit of hope.
Thanks, Joe. I suppose the last time that I was in speaking here at Ballybunion, I've been attending as audience participant over the years, but the first time that I was here, I was speaking on women in politics. And because one of the things that I've been involved in over the past few years is that I was one of the founders of the 50/50 group, and which was an organisation that was set up to lobby for the introduction of the quotas in the Dáil, and I'll talk about that later on. But it is great to be back in Ballybunion, and this time talking about women in business and women in leadership. And I suppose for me, this idea of discussing today authentic leadership is very timely. And because I have an 11-year-old daughter, and I think about like what is influencing and what are her influences today. And I'm looking at things online, and Kim Kardashian, and where does she find authenticity and things that are real and substantive and enduring. And for me, it actually comes right back down to local and to the immediate circle of people in one's life and in one's community. And in that sense, for me, some of the most inspiring people are people who get up and do it and start their own business. And that takes real courage and real guts. And one of the programs that we run in Musgrave is the Food Academy. And over the past few years, we have been mentoring and helping small local food suppliers to get a listing in their local super value and to move on then to a regional and eventually to a national listing or even international. And some of those businesses are really, really inspiring. They provide employment in their local community, they have innovative products, and they are bursting with energy and enthusiasm, and they gave me great hope. So that would be one example. Daryl asked me for some examples. On the other extreme then, and given what we're talking about here today, I would actually reference the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, who, and when you think about authenticity, it's about putting our money where our mouth is, and he is somebody who has said that he is a feminist, and he has challenged himself, and his wife has challenged him and said, that's very good what you're saying to our daughters, but what exactly are you saying to our son about feminism? And what kind of a feminist do you want him to grow up to be? And that really made him stop and think. And when I look at his cabinet, it's great to see that it is 50-50 male and female. So,
I just want to ask you, Anya, the quotas that were introduced attracted and repelled in equal measure and divided women as much as men, but I think they have been a success to some degree. When you look at how politics is changing, do you think that it's better for women in Ireland in politics? And also just what Adele was talking about there, authentic leadership, because it seems to me, Barack Obama's presidency wasn't flawless by any means, but it certainly seemed to be a presidency and a leadership style of authenticity, empathy, and it seems now, in a very, very short space of time, we've moved into a politics of fear.
Good evening, everybody, first. Yes, politics is very worried at the moment. I think around the world for many, many reasons. We've all seen what's happened in America. And, while Barack Obama did come in and he was a very authentic leader and had many challenges along the way, and he was somebody who I had got a lot of inspiration from. When we see what's happening today and a lack of any kind of diversity in the Trump administration.
There's pictures of the men that are, I don't think that's quite as accidental as we...
Yes, but it's certainly setting us back. I believe, and I'm very worried about the kind of leadership that's going to happen there, and especially when we see what's going on in North Korea and very other things. When I was thinking about this last night, I was thinking about authenticity and leadership, and I suppose when you think about it in a business world, it's certainly a lot easier to think about the value systems you have and the principles you have and bringing people with you and all the things we all like to see in good leaders. But when you transfer that into politics and into public life, it can certainly be far more challenging, because I suppose, sometimes in politics it's more about perception than fact. And you could be doing 99 things really well and you do make one mistake and that's the one that's remembered and that's the one that gets the headline. And I suppose, we heard Mary Harney talk about that earlier. So, it's and that affects how you react, because once you've had a few of those experiences, you start to kind of close in and maybe not be the self you are.
Do politicians change? Because what Mary Harney was saying earlier is that most people who are in politics are there because they're concerned with public interest, they're concerned about policy. Do they change because of the culture surrounding them?
Well, certainly I can only speak for myself, and most of the people that I have met in politics, because to be honest, you wouldn't get into politics unless you were passionate about it, because it's not an easy job. From the point of view, it's 24/7 and all of that, and you really have to love it to want to be there, and as many battles you have to fight to get things done and so on. But I would believe that, certainly in what I have seen, everybody who's there is there for a reason that they believe in. I mightn't share that belief, but that's what makes it a democratic society, and that's the one we want to live in. But certainly I think it does change, depending on the experiences you've had, and I suppose that's influenced by media a lot of the time, and social media and perceptions and different things that happen, and suddenly you're kind of, if you've had a couple of bad experiences, let me say it like that, it certainly changes how you stop maybe and maybe be more open in what you say. You certainly kind of close in a bit, so only that's healthy. Yeah.
What about Gillian? Obviously, there's been a huge emphasis in recent years in STEM and in actively targeting women and young girls to get into an area that would have been previously very, very male dominated. Obviously, more recent kind of controversies around, Uber and the culture in Silicon Valley probably hasn't helped that. But how well are we progressing in the STEM or in your sphere?
Thank you, and good evening, everybody. So maybe to answer that, I could just go back to your original opening question and kind of lead into it. So in my world, things are a little bit inverted. So I left school 30 years ago, and the world was my oyster. I had a dream job in my head, and I went for it. I didn't get the points I wanted in my leaving cert, so what? I came out with so much confidence, I knew I'd get there in the end. So I did something else in college first, stayed on and did what I wanted to do at the end of the day. And really, I had every opportunity after that and felt confident enough to go after all of them. And eventually, landed where I thought, that was it. Partnership in a law firm, great, that's what I always wanted. And then I looked around and there was other opportunities, and one in particular that I took was an opportunity to lead a business organisation. So I was president of Cork Chamber for 2 years. And in that role, I got the shock of my life. And it wasn't in the business environment. I worked with great men and great women. I saw incredible opportunities out there, particularly in the science and technology field. I saw jobs that I never knew were out there. And I was just blown away. I was saying, where were all of these opportunities? Why didn't I know about them? And when I delved into it a little bit more, I found, just like we heard in the previous panel, that there was CEOs and HR executives in these companies saying, these are great opportunities, you're right, but we actually can't get people to fill those roles. And I just couldn't believe it. So I delved into it a little bit more. I went back to the school where I came out of, that I thought, gave me the pathway of opportunity, and said, are you telling the students about these jobs? And do they understand what studying physics means? Do they understand why actually it is important to stick with honours maths? Or is it all about the points? And they weren't telling these students about these great opportunities and these jobs. And so you'd say, look, really, does it matter? But it bloody well does matter. And it matters because when you think about it, the greatest opportunities in the world we live in come from science, technology, and engineering. And if we're not empowering the next generation of leaders, or certainly 50% of them, with the skills to lead the way and to be innovative and to transform our country and our world and improve our lives through science, technology, and engineering, then we're leaving a whole world of opportunity behind, and we're limiting these young women. So just to finish the point, I had all the opportunities. I thought I took them all, but I didn't. And I didn't because I didn't know they were out there. So I think we as a society have questions to ask ourselves in terms of, are we actually limiting and are we not leading in the way that we could?
And how do we do that? Because one of the actually, with the technological revolution, although in the first wave, particularly in the US, it might have been blue collar, male workers, non-university educated who feel they're faring the brunt. But when you look to the future and look to things like artificial intelligence, to the type of technologies that are going to transform things, it is women who actually may be disproportionately affected in future waves. So does it go back and, it was mentioned kind of in the earlier panel, is it a gender stereotyping? Is it back to the Lego that may or may not have, makeup? Because it seems to me that for most, when a lot of our key kind of things that we form as young women are as young as 5 or 6. I remember growing up in the north during the Troubles, when we didn't know what Catholic or Protestants were, but in the schoolyard we would say, "Are you a cup or a plate?" which was the same thing, but it was a difference. So even by 5 or 6 in that context, we knew difference. And I'm just wondering, there's been a lot of focus on young women in secondary school, but does it need actually to start much earlier?
So there's a whole host of issues, and maybe just to touch on one or two of them. If you look at, so start really young, and if you look at, as I had an opportunity to do recently, a picture of an Argos type toys catalogue 14, 15 years ago, and one today. And if you look at it in black and white, it's exactly the same. There's lots of prams, there's lots of dolls' houses, there's lots of Lego. They're kind of browns and greys. And you put colour on it. And today, all of the prams and all of the dolls' houses and all of the dolls are pink. Various shades of pink. And all of the others are still the browns and greys and all of that. So there, it starts that young, and we heard in the last panel about 5 and 6 year olds and how there is this transformational mind change at that stage. So that is there. And then if you take it another level, and which is just incredible, but maybe it goes to your point already a moment ago where you said, now with what we're hearing from the President of the United States and his administration, is it okay to say things that we never said before? Just 3 weeks ago, in the run-up to Easter, we had a UK co-op advertising an Easter egg by saying, reward your daughter when she's done the washing up. Now, how easy would it have been to say, reward your children when they do the washing up? But it was reward your daughter when she does the washing up. So here we are in 2017, and that's what we're faced with. Now, it was withdrawn, so that's good. It's important that we build a real awareness around these. So they're all issues, it's all out there. But for me, what was the really important thing is it's back to education. I'm passionate about education. I'm passionate about making sure that people have all of the tools that we can give them from the ages of 5 to 18 and on into university to allow them make the most of the opportunities that are out there. And in schools, unfortunately, for various reasons, we have a long way to go. So if you look at just the sciences, to use it as an example, and I know there's lots of teachers in the room, the majority of science teachers in schools, particularly, the reality is a lot of them are women teachers, and a lot of them have a biology background. So, we don't necessarily upskill our teachers sufficiently so as to try and change the conversations a little bit. We had, when we launched I Wish for Dublin last year, we had a panel of young women speaking. And one of the young girls who was there gave a really interesting example. She said she was asked by the NC to give her view on, where things are at as a 17-year-old. And she said, well, look, I can just give you an example from my school. And she said, I don't think it's any different. And I can only compare myself to my brothers, because that's all I know. She's 17 after all. And she said, I study honours maths, and I hear the teacher saying to us in the lead up to the Christmas period, if you think it's hard now, it's just going to get worse. So call it if you don't think you're able for it. And she said, I chat to my brothers about it, and they did honours maths. And the conversations their teacher has with them is, stick with it and you'll get it. So that's not in any way to be disparaging to the teachers, but it's just a mindset, and it's just one example of the way we are dealing with young girls. So there's lots of issues.
Earlier this week I was speaking to a group of the Women in Media group, young journalism students at DCU, where I graduated from 15 years ago, and it's a very worrying time for young women in journalism. They're wondering, do they have a future? Does journalism have a future? And all sorts of things. But they asked each of us in the panel, what would we do differently all over again? And I said I would have started in business. I would have started in business journalism. I would have found my way around a set of accounts. I had a brilliant career in so many areas, but I said I would have got that financial literacy, because if you can target that, you can target pretty much anything. And it seems to me, Adele, that, business was the one area where it was meant to be, kind of meritocratic. You work hard, keep your head down, you'll get ahead. And yet, every time we look at the stats in terms of like a lot of careers, there's lots of women at the entry level and there's a lot of attrition, very, very kind of heady at the top. And when we look at our boards and we look at the number of women in senior management positions, including in media, in executive and editorial positions, we still don't have a critical mass.
Yeah. Just to pick up on your point there, and I will come back to address that, but just to pick up on your point about talking to those students, I was talking recently with a CEO in Dublin, and he said to me in confidence, so obviously I won't repeat his name or his company, but he said,
Twitter won't mind.
He said if he had his way, he would never employ another man into the company. He said,
name him, please.
He said that the young women who come into him are better prepared, better organised, better team players, better presentation skills, etc., etc. And he just does not see the same coming from the young men who are coming in through graduate programs, etc. And he finished that conversation with me by saying, but sure, of course, we couldn't do that. So we apply a 50-50 kind of model. Yeah. And nobody bats an eyelid about that, right? So yes, we do have a problem because 60% of the graduates globally coming out of university are women. And 80% of the buying decisions in the world today are made by women. So why then don't we have higher percentage of women in decision-making positions in businesses? And Grant Thornton have been doing a global study of businesses since 2004. And what they've been looking at is women in senior leadership positions and how they're progressing. And their report for 2017 is that stands at about 25%. It's 26 in Ireland, it's 23 in the States. But the sad thing is that it was 25% in 2004. Right, so it hasn't moved. And you have some countries doing a bit better, some doing a bit worse. And then when you look at the real decision making in companies, so the CEO, the COO, the CFO, it's less than 10%. And that hasn't moved either.
There was an interesting discussion recently for International Women's Day actually at Accenture, and Sasha Wiggins, who's the chief executive of Barclays in Ireland, was talking about, because we were talking about this, is it quotas, is it carrot and stick, how do you change that culture? And she was saying that once diversity, and obviously diversity is much, much bigger than just women and men, but once that was made a KPI, the key performance goal, part of that is what had changed it. So are those, and I think that I'm going to just go to Tanya shortly in terms of the quotas. Phil Hogan, everybody thought the sky was going to fall in when he introduced those quotas, and lo and behold, when you threatened political parties that they would be hit where it hurts, i.e. in their pocket, suddenly they find women, and suddenly just even that act of bringing women forward did help improve.
Yeah, can I just go back in on that? Because you do find in big companies now that there are a lot of women's networking groups and mentoring type groups, etc. And they are important because, and I'm sure we'll debate this, about confidence, and women have to have the confidence to go forward for positions and to go for roles, more senior roles. But I would say, Dermot, it's not a diversity issue. It's a societal issue. And the mistake that we're making in companies is putting this issue into HR, right? And now it's a HR issue, and it's about diversity, and we need, more.
You tick the box.
You tick the box. But if you put it on the agenda of the executive team or the board, and you develop some KPIs, as you say, and you measure it, and you put somebody in charge of it, and you transparently report it, now it gets done.
How did you feel about the quotas? I always personally felt, I'm probably like a lot of women, I'm mixed about them, but I think they do work, and even I felt that even for 2 or 3 electoral terms until the culture changed, so be it. How did you feel about them, and how, now that we've a little bit of experience of them, how they've worked here?
I suppose when we were debating it on the Dáil, it was a bit mixed at times, but I certainly was very much in favour of it, and we've seen it in the last election where we have more females standing, we get more females elected, and that's it, and the proof is done. And hopefully we won't need them forever, that after a period of time we will get the 40%. I think it's the 2019 election or something, there's going to have to be 40%, and then hopefully to get on to 50%. But just to go back to what Edel was saying, I mean, I really think the only way we're going to change the leadership issues in across companies is that if we make it a quota. Like if you turn around to every board and say you're going to have 40 or 50% women, then that's done. Or where we have too many women, 40 or 50% men. Like we always talk about the other way around.
Our education system would be very, very different if that was the case.
And we always talk about it the other way around. Yeah. But as a parent of young kids who are in a local school and it's all women teachers, nothing against women, I would certainly like to see more men in the room, to be honest, because I think it's very good for diversity and very good for their thinking and so on. So that would be one that really concerns me. I suppose when we look at the future and we look at where women are going and where the world is going, I mean, now for probably over the next 10 years, we're going to have IT jobs that are going to replace thinking. We're going to have robots out there making different, so we're going to have banking jobs that are going to be gone. We're going to have solicitor jobs are going to be transferred over to robots.
I'm not sure about that one.
But certain areas of it, so we're going to have, the next 10 years could be amazing. Because people are going to be able to work differently than they've ever worked before. People are going to be able to work remotely, better,
and arguably their work circumstances will be very, very different because it's going to be so different. Maybe just Gillian, on that kind of whole issue, one thing that comes up every single time I speak with women, speak about women, or speak with men about women and these issues, the one thing that comes up is a lack of confidence and bridging that gap. And I had my own experience with that last year when I applied for my own role, because a couple of years ago I did what a man would do. I applied for a job I wasn't qualified for and went for the role of editor of the Irish Independent at a time when I wasn't ready, nor were they. But I did it as an exercise and a flag waving, thinking maybe in a couple of years' time they will think that I'm thinking about that. And it was only when I was in the final interview having a panic, thinking there is a possibility I might get this, but what was really interesting about that experience was that from then on I was a marked woman, albeit in a positive way, because when opportunities came up I couldn't step back because I had put my head above the parapet and had kind of put it all out there. And what was interesting that was that it made me think differently about myself. And I just wonder sometimes, do we have to wait for someone to tell us or encourage us? And what is it that we can do to breach that, Gillian, that confidence gap?
So for me, it's always been about it's back to education. I think there's nothing has greater power to give confidence to people than to feel that they have the information that they need to make the right decision. So, and that's a key part of what we do with I Wish. It's about bridging that information gap. So all 17-year-olds know what a nurse does. All 17-year-olds know what a teacher does. All 17-year-olds do not know what a process engineer does. All 17-year-olds do not know what a physicist does. All 17-year-olds do not know what food engineering means. So how can they have the confidence to put their hand up and say, oh, I'm going to be a food engineer? Oh, well, what does that do? Oh, I haven't a clue. So it's about actually empowering these young women, these future leaders, by giving them very simple information. And we think they should know, but of course they don't know. I didn't know when I was 17. So it's about actually putting...
Well, is it information or is it attitude? Because I heard recently a brilliant phrase which I'm stealing and using, but like in journalism, if you credit it, it's okay. But it was the chairperson of the ESB who introduced me this phrase, talking about, and what we touched on it earlier, that notion of women self-selecting out of leadership roles, self-selecting out of a traditional male path. And it's that question I always thought, well, is it a glass ceiling? And she told us, no, it's a sticky floor sometimes. So are we guilty of that, Anya, sometimes, maybe just not pushing ourselves out there, maybe because of fear or a lack of confidence or some other factors?
It's a very interesting question, and I suppose I'm in a kind of a quite reflective mode myself at the moment, having coming out of politics and suddenly finding myself for the first time in my life technically unemployed the day after, and trying to figure out what am I going to do now. I mean, I'm an educated and qualified accountant and have run my own businesses and so on, but once you get politics into the bloodstream, what challenges there after that, or what is exciting to go to work to. So it's been a reflective year, and just to say I did apply for 2 jobs, of which both I didn't even get an interview. So I mean, talk about getting your confidence certainly does get pushed back, and you kind of question the whole world at times, and sometimes that can be good. But I suppose if we are to look at confidence in young people, I think it's important to talk about education, and I agree, education is freedom, and the more of it we do, and we need to do it lifelong, and I'm big into self-development and so on. But I think a lot of it as well needs to come from home, and these unconscious bias and what's been talked around the table, or in the house, or the way neighbours talk, or whatever the wider family talk about. I think that's a huge role model, and I think that's something that we should all be, as parents, maybe our grandparents or whatever, be more conscious of. But also, I came across this phase in my self-reflective self in the last couple of months. It's all about the self-talk. So the subconscious hears what we say. So what we say, our subconscious hears, and that's how we process information. And actually, it was interesting because if you look at this, it should be taught in schools at like 5 years of age, where what you're saying and how you're thinking and what you're watching, this goes into your subconscious self, and we forget to edit the tape. And we can edit the tape, and we can change our brain, and we can change how we think. So I think that's a process that's worked, and I'm only at the start of it, but I'm very excited about it, and I think, God, I wish somebody had told me this 30 odd years ago.
Part of the reason why my broadcast career probably never took off is I forgot what time we started at. I don't know how long we've been talking, but it's about 7:05. So
To make a comment on politics for a minute, which is about, so we've had the first round of quotas, right, in the last election, and we'll have it again, but it doesn't apply to the local elections, right? And if you're interested in being a career politician,
that's the pipeline.
That's the pipeline. Local politics is really important to build your network, to cut your teeth, and a lot of times, it's very difficult, as Anya will attest. It's very difficult to go straight in at national politics, right? And if you look at the stats, so we broke the 20% mark, right, with the quota, so it's not fantastic, but we hit 22% at the national. But we're still not doing fantastically well even at the local level, right? And you say, okay, so why is that as well? Why aren't women going forward for politics even at a local level? And even though we have again improved, and hopefully in 2019 it will be improved again, but we're still way back by European standards, where it's an average of about 32% female. And I've really been thinking about this, because if you look at the numbers of women who run charities, non-profit, who will get up and do it for themselves if there's a sick child, or if the roof needs to be fixed and money needs to be raised for the community, or whatever it might be. There are 22,000 of those women in the country. 22,000 who are getting up, finding the time and managing, family life, etc., all of the things that we assume are barriers to going to the next level, right? So it's back to a lot of the points that Gillian was making around that confidence piece and understanding, and also women actually like to be asked. That's another thing, that we're kind of a bit polite.
And we assume if we just put the head down and work hard, it'll be noticed and it'll happen. But
exactly. And I don't know how many times Anya was asked, maybe she'll tell us, but apparently it takes six asks, right, for a woman to agree to go forward for politics or that, right? So what I would say is find one of those women and tap them on the shoulder and say, you know what, you're really good, you should run.
I want to do something just slightly different. forgot again that our title was Authentic Leadership, but sometimes it seems to me, and especially in my new world of writing about business, reading about business, is that sometimes, like when you think of authentic leadership, it's all those positive, good, amazing qualities. And I look at so much stuff in business where inauthentic leadership or sometimes bad behaviour is not called out. So just even recently, some of the two biggest corporate stories, United Airlines, Volkswagen, their shares didn't suffer. Volkswagen were back doing very, very well. United's share prices actually went up. Is that a factor sometimes? Is that, sometimes society does reward a ruthlessness and it does tolerate kind of high levels of inauthentic or not good kind of behaviour. And I think that for a lot of women, that's very, very off-putting.
I mean,
and men, obviously. But I mean, I think that kind of very rough and tumble.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that that reputation and trust is very important. I think Volkswagen has been lucky, really, and I think that another company wouldn't get away with that, and that consumers and that the long-term impact on reputation would be a lot more severe. And I mean, if you look at, the United piece is quite shocking. But if you look at how quickly Pepsi reacted, and within a couple of hours, they put out one statement which was a bit all over the place, and within a couple of hours they had withdrawn that ad and realised that they had made a big mistake. So
and then look at how long it took Fox News to deal with Bill O'Reilly. It wasn't the fact that 13 million had been paid out over several years. It took a New York Times article backed by all the advertising pulling it, and it seemed kind of weird that maybe they hadn't thought of it several years earlier when those, so I just find it very interesting sometimes in business how bad behaviour is tolerated or sometimes rewarded.
Yes, absolutely, yeah, and we do tend to like the bad boys, all right, and Michael O'Leary is probably one of the most popular CEOs and inspirational.
Donald Trump was elected mostly by educated
53%
white women with third level education, so there we go.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, I want to open it up to the floor, but before we do, I just want to ask maybe one or two things for maybe you to consider. What does authentic leadership mean to you? And obviously this year, the International Women's Day was the whole notion of be bold or being brave for change. Do you know what's the bravest thing you've done in your career? And for sometimes it's people is stepping aside.
I would say the bravest thing I ever did was I sent an email to another woman to say we have a problem, there's a simple solution, will we do something about it? And the bravest thing she ever did, to your point, Edel, is she said, let's meet for coffee.
Yeah, brilliant, very good. Anya?
I was thinking about this, and I suppose I was reflective in particular again in my case in the last year, and I think the bravest thing I did was not to run for the Senate, because I only lost my election by a couple of hundred votes, and everybody assumed I would run for the Senate and that that I possibly would have got elected. You never know until you run. And rightly or wrongly, I had decided myself personally that I had voted against the Senate, I had campaigned against it, and that I personally felt I couldn't go out and ask people to vote for me to be a senator. And it wasn't anything like the decision has been made on the Senate, and I'm very happy about that. It's just that at the time I had felt I had campaigned against it and I couldn't ask people that I wouldn't be authentic in my doing. And I can remember saying this to colleagues at the time and afterwards, and they all just thought I was mad. They said, nobody will remember and nobody will care. And I said, yes, but I will. And if you step across that line too many times, I think every time you do it, it's a little harder to come back.
Adele, have you ever acted in an authentic way or a manner that was true to you? No, wait before it goes out on Twitter and it sounds really, really bad and I'm facing a lawsuit. That went against you in some sense, like sometimes to take a stand on something that you might have maybe suffered or you felt you suffered in the short term, but you were confident about it, because I think that is a challenge facing everyone, male, female,
You gave me a curveball.
I did, yeah. And you know what was amazing? It just came in.
Yes, and actually, it's an example of when I absolutely wasn't brave. I spent a number of years in Brussels as a lobbyist, and I decided anyway that I would go for a new job. I was getting a little bit bored where I was, and I was offered a job with the chemical industry, and it was a lot of money, and even though inside my head I was like, I do not want to work for the chemical industry, and I took the job, and I lasted 8 months because culturally, morally, everything else, it just wasn't for me. But it did teach me a lesson, and I said, right, after that, I actually got an interview with Philip Morris, the tobacco company. I said, now, hang on a second. I'm not making the same mistake twice. So I'm not going to work for the chemical industry, and I'm not going to work for tobacco.
Brilliant. Maybe just throw it open to the floor, and please do participate and join in if there's any questions for any of us here on the panel. Don't be shy. I think there's a wee bit of a...
Go on. Yeah.
Go on. There's always one.
No, I was interested in, you talked a lot about education and women and confidence. And I'm just wondering, I've often felt, I have 3 daughters who've more or less finished their education now, and I'm looking back now, I often wonder, would it have been a good idea had they been taught public speaking in school? Because I think there's a problem with women sometimes using their voices and making themselves heard and being a little bit more strident, in inverted commas, that they don't feel comfortable in doing that, whether it's at board level or whether it's making a presentation or working in media or whatever. I'm just wondering what the panel thought about public speaking.
It's interesting. When we did that thing out in DCU, so Una Mullally and Christine Bohan, two wonderful female journalists who aren't afraid to use their voice, but I did a quick survey in my own newsroom, and I asked my female colleagues if they were to give advice to these students, what would you say to them? And almost universally, in every one of the replies I got, they said, make your voice heard. Make your voice heard. And I was like, God, these are really fantastic, confident women, but who even felt that was the biggest thing perhaps that held them back in the early part of their journalism career. I don't think it's unique to that, but only is there something about that women are afraid to make our voices heard, in part because there are so many censors ready and willing to cut you down?
For me personally, it was the most terrifying experience after I got elected. Running the campaign was no problem. I had to stand up in a truck in Mill Street that night and make a speech, and I actually nearly died. And that was the start of it. And then going into the Dáil and having to speak publicly. I mean, I've spoken at AGMs, I've delivered accounts, I've done all of that before, but it was in a, very safe area. You can answer the questions. What's made up the financial statements or whatever. Actually, here at Ballybunion, I used to be the auditor for the Ballybunion golf club. So that was an interesting experience as well. But anyway, on a different note, but yeah, absolutely, it was the most terrifying part. But what I can say is that after some practice and lots of experience, you do become a little bit more, but it's definitely, I would encourage anybody to do it. I even go and say, do speech and drama, be part of a drama class, or, be on stage, because, it is like walking out on stage every time you do public.
But at the same time, I would completely agree with that, but I would suggest that at the same time we have to delete from the vocabulary the word bossy.
Yes.
Women are always being, if they speak up, they're being termed very bossy, which is so derogatory. Not the boss, bossy.
I know, because there's a whole sort of movement around the whole girl boss, lady boss, and people get them on their shoes and everything, but...
let's just turn it around and make it funky.
Yeah, ruin the word.
Easier, rebranded.
I would just like, to ask you on a practical level how some of your ideas might be implemented. Like, I'm a teacher, I'm in the school, so I know the situation there. Now, I've always felt that the students, they don't really understand all the different courses on offer in the universities and colleges, etc., because there's such a huge range now. And it's very hard for them to know what exactly you're doing in different jobs. And but how do you actually get that information to them? I think it's vital as well, for not just for women but for the men as well. But I know the career guidance counsellor is the person in charge of this in the school, but they just don't have time. And a lot of the times, we as teachers as well, we don't know exactly. We don't know enough about the jobs either out there pertaining to our discipline. Do you know what I mean? So we have to be kind of educated first, I suspect. But there actually needs to be a structure in place to do that. At the moment, it's inadequate. The time allowed for career guidance and all that is inadequate. The career guidance counsellor has 2 roles, which is virtually impossible to fulfil because you're meant to be counselling and you're meant to be career guidance. Do you know what I mean? What one person's been asked to do is mad. So I'm just saying, have you any ideas around that? Because you've set up a company in that.
Because the Colour Dojo really took off in our schools. Is it that kind of role model for people coming in?
What we decided to do, because we're just 3 women who have full-time jobs, and over the last 3 years we've reached out to 7,000 young girls. And how we do that is through showcase events. So we contact all of the schools in the Cork region, and earlier this year all of the schools in the Dublin region, and for example in Dublin we have schools from Laois and from Kilkenny and from quite a broad reach. And what we do is we do a combination of having inspirational people, and it's the power of the voice again. Inspirational people speak to the young girls about their journey and their career path. But a key element, we also get industry to showcase what they do. And in order to participate at Irish in one of the large exhibition spaces, you have to commit to doing something interactive with the girls where you can show them what you do. So Pepsi will do experiments which show what food engineering looks like and feels like, and give them an example of it so that they can see firsthand. And we break the large groups into small groups so that the girls can ask questions. We can put volunteers with them so that when the girls are afraid to use their voice and ask the questions, the volunteers start to initiate the conversations for them. So in that way it's a little bit of kind of hand-holding and direct engagement, actually seeing what a job looks like. And then we have these connector stands where we invite higher education institutes to participate to show, okay, well if you'd like to be a food engineer, and I'm just using that as an example, here are the courses we have in CIT or DIT or UCC or wherever that will help you get there. And we find that works really well because initially the girls have had the benefit of 40 minutes listening to various panels and keynote speakers, engaging them and encouraging them and motivating them, and then they go into this exhibition space where they see firsthand actually what happens. That's the way we did it because it means we can be of scale. Like the first year we just had 1,000, the second year we had 2,000 students, and this year because we did it in Cork and Dublin we had 4,000 students. So we can manage just about that scale, and that's important to us. But I know there's other companies like, Accenture do exhibitions as well for girls, and they were a great partner for us this year. You have Delhi and C. Everybody does it in a different way. They go out to schools with their IT is Not for Geeks programs. So everyone does it in a different way, but for us it was about reaching the most numbers to try and change the conversation and the impact very quickly, and also having a very hands-on interactive piece. But the teachers and the feedback that we got from the teachers is just what you were saying. We don't know enough, we need to be educated on it. And in fairness, Sean Sherlock commissioned a report a couple of years back, which Professor Brian McRae from DCU chaired. And he made some recommendations just to your points. We need to revisit and really transform our STEM education, and a key part of that is the teachers. Also, like what you were saying on a while ago, key part is the parents too. Women have got to be brave about the options and the choices for their daughters as well, and of course it goes to sons too. But this is what I know about is the shortage of female engagement. So I'm with you, and so is everyone else, but we're waiting for the transformational change.
Well, indeed. And then I'll just move my...
Just one quick comment on it. In my work in the Cork Foundation, I had been in Boston just maybe 3 years ago, but I was in a hotel and I was talking to the hotel manager. He was someone connected back to Cork. But he was talking about a program they do in Boston where they go into the local national schools and the teacher goes into the hotel for a day and they get to experience each other's jobs.
And I kind of thought, God, that's a really funky thing to do, and I thought it would be a great experience for everybody, because the hotel manager gets to see what it's like in a classroom. And
Oh my goodness, you're going to send Joan to the Dáil, aren't you? She'll do well there.
absolutely, but that'd be great. And hopefully she stands for Fine Gael.
Cormac.
The anonymous CEO you mentioned, who said would take on mostly females, graduates.
Oh yes,
got
the anonymous CEO, yes.
And I'm just curious from a number of reasons, but mostly as a father of 3 little girls, what did he surmise as to why and how they got to that situation, as opposed to lads going through the graduate program as well, what the differentiators were?
So what he seemed to be saying was that it was about mainly about preparation. That the women seemed to take preparation much more seriously. And if a project needed to be done, it was the women behind the scenes who were working to make sure that all the parts were in place, and that they were better team players. But then, of course, what does tend to happen is that as you go up then through the organisation, the women seem to fall away, and it is the men that in much larger numbers that make their way up the organisation. And I think that there is something there about the confidence, women's confidence, that they are very good at ensuring, and I see this as well in teams, ensuring that the project is completed on time and in budget, etc. But they're not the ones doing the presentation at the end then. They tend to be the ones that are the second in command and making sure that everything is organised for the presentation, the computer works, the screen's up, etc. Joan?
My first editor was a woman, Fiona McHugh, in the Sunday Times, and we went in on a graduate programme, and she had a view. She was saying that was very, very similar, that you would get the CVs in and the girls would be ostensibly better than the boys in terms of their academic record, everything, but that when it came to the interview, that one of the key differentiators sometimes was the confidence and how they presented, and that's I think that's something that women really need to work on. But we're awful at self-promotion, and when we do, it's what Claire was saying earlier.
Yeah, and
she's got notions.
It's the running down the job spec and going, I can do that, I can't do that, I won't apply. Whereas a fellow would go down on this and say, yeah, I'm definitely made for the job. It is that difference in approach.
The goal that we set ourselves for IWISH is to increase the amount of women participating in higher education to ICT courses, science courses and engineering courses to 30% by 2020. Because can you imagine, from 2004, in 2004, the figures for each of those disciplines were between 18 and 22%. In 2014, they were no different. So that means women are participating significantly less in the courses that are going to be the future. So to that point, yes, there is a difference, and that's why it's important that we call it out.
Sure. One thing we won't get a chance to discuss, but I'm fascinated about, and we might maybe continue it elsewhere, is a different conversation that's coming up around the emasculation of men and the emasculation of young men. So there's been a lot of surveys recently in respect of young millennials and showing a hardening of attitudes towards women and a fear that they are being displaced by women getting ahead, which is a completely different kind of a conversation, yet one that we have to pay attention to, because it seemed to me that a lot of the support that was drummed up in the US election elsewhere was about this marginalisation of men in a certain category. But it's interesting that now those feelings that young millennials who have the same opportunities as women are thinking that they are being discriminated against. It's a totally different conference, by the way. But maybe on that note, I just wanted, We promised you a random open conversation, and I hope that you've had it. I've enjoyed being here so much that I forgot that I had a job to do as moderator. But on your behalf and mine, I'd like to thank Adele, Anya and Gillian, and to thank once again Joan for your amazing hospitality and having us here. Thank you.